Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to FREDLA's Learning Community for Family Leaders. My name is Jane Walker, and I'm the Executive Director of FREDLA, and we would love it if you would introduce yourself in the chat box next to the PowerPoint slides. The topic of our call today is supporting fathers, and we have an excellent lineup of presenters for you today. Before we get to that, I'm required to tell you that this learning community is hosted by FREDLA, a partner in the National Technical Assistance Network for Children's Behavioral Health that is operated and coordinated through the University of Maryland under a contract with the Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, otherwise known as SAMHSA. And we are very appreciative of their support for this learning community. So we've been on something of a hiatus over the summer. Our last learning community call was actually in June, so we hope everyone had a good summer and found some time to rest and rejuvenate. For anyone who might be new to FREDLA or to these calls, FREDLA is a network of family-run organizations across the country, and we're dedicated to building leadership and organizational capacity for family-run organizations. And as I mentioned earlier, we are a core partner in the National Technical Assistance Network for Children's Behavioral Health, which is how we are able to do these calls. Before we get to the introduction of our presenters here, I wanted to encourage everyone to use the chat box here throughout the call. Everyone will be muted, but to use the chat box to make comments, share resources, and ask questions. We'll have an opportunity later on to address some of those questions. So before I turn the call over to our facilitator today, I wanted to share something that I read in the newspaper this morning that I think really sets the stage for our call today. I live in Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C., and every morning I open the Washington Post. This morning, there was an entire special section of the newspaper devoted to the topic of parenting. And one article was on fatherhood. It was written by a journalist whose wife is about to give birth, and he was wondering about what advice he could get on being a good dad. One of the people he turned to for advice was Bill Clinton. Okay, so remember, this is a journalist connected to political figures. The rest of us would turn to our parents or our friends to ask for advice, but he turned to Bill Clinton. So regardless of your political leanings, I thought the message from Bill Clinton was very powerful. And here's what he said. A couple of years after we moved to the White House, when Chelsea was in high school, we had what may have been our only argument. The former President Bill Clinton wrote in an email, "The subject is long forgotten, but I remember telling her, as long as you live in this house, being president is my second most important job." So what he was saying there, of course, is that being a father is far more important than even being a president. And I thought that set a perfect stage for the importance of our topic today on fatherhood. So with that said, it's my pleasure to turn the call over to our special facilitator today, who is Hugh Davis, the Executive Director of Wisconsin Family Ties, and also, I'm proud to say, a member of FREDLA's Board of Directors. Hugh, over to you.
Thanks, Jane. Well, it's a privilege to be moderating this call today. I'm really interested in the content. Wisconsin Family Ties is a family-run organization, and I can tell you that well over 90% of the parents that we deal with, not dads. So I'm in this content as well as those of you who are on the call. And I'm standing between you and the real content, so I'll try to move swiftly through these few slides. So I'm not too sure that we needed the APA to tell us that the traditional or stereotypical picture of fathers is no longer dominant. I think that that's been fairly apparent. One of my friends mentioned yesterday on Facebook that she has introduced so many different people as mom or dad that her kids get exasperated and ask her, just how many moms or dads do you have? She went on to explain in her Facebook post that she grew up in a household impacted by divorce and with neither parent very involved in her life. And then she added, I had voids, huge ones. I was lucky to have friends who shared their parents with me. Lucky those parents took me under their wings and cared about me like I was one of their own. It has shaped me into the woman I am today, a woman who believes that blood is not the only bond that makes you family. These moms and dads hold a very special place in my heart. So to kind of underpin that sentiment is this chart here with the fact that there are more stay-at-home dads than ever before. And while that statistic on this slide is still a very small, some might even say minuscule percentage, it does represent a pretty significant shift. And if those of you who are on the call are above the age of 40, I would guess that many of you would have a hard time thinking of an example from your childhood where there was a stay-at-home dad who was the primary caregiver for their kids. Again, this is another duh statement in my mind. There is overwhelming evidence about the impact of nurture on children. And it's well established that nurture from parents is a huge impact on our kids. As you might guess, involved fathers have a positive impact on their children's lives. And if the research said otherwise, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be having this webinar. All right. As a father and as someone who didn't have his first child until the age of 35, this chart stings a little bit. The first bullet is just math, but the other four, they're pretty hard to take. Whether you agree with this study or not, I think it's pretty clear that there's a need for services and supports targeting fathers. Today, we're fortunate to have two accomplished fathers with us who are doing just that. First up is going to be George Fleming. George is a program supervisor with Allegheny Family Network's Fathers Involved Now division in Pittsburgh, PA. Fathers Involved Now specializes in support, reunification, and most importantly, father engagement. George's program is unique in that it has 6 dedicated full-time staff specifically concentrating on barriers and issues related to fathers. They have a contract with the Allegheny County Department of Human Services backed by a grant from the Heinz Foundation. With that, I'd like to turn it over to George.
Good afternoon, all, and what a pleasure to be with everyone this evening, or should I say afternoon. Before I get started, let me just say a couple things. As Hugh stated, that we do have 6 dedicated fathers, but what really strikes me about our organization is that we probably have the largest department that is dedicated to working with fathers throughout Allegheny County, and perhaps even further. Our primary focus as an organization, obviously, is to strengthen families. But for me, one of the greatest things I think we do is provide empathy and insight to working with families, because as a family organization, and before I came here 3+ years ago, and I've been in the field all my life. I had not heard of Allegheny Family Network, nor did I know anything about family-ran orgs. Having raised several children with mental health, emotional behavior concerns, I was thrilled to find out, a little late in the game, but thrilled to find out there was support for fathers and families that I could have benefited from some 20, 30 years ago. So our first slide basically says what we're here to do and who we support. I would say that the key thing is when we see the word mental health, we as an organization do not specifically mean they have to have a diagnosis. We have a whole lot of families we serve, and I'll use the word family and father interchangeably because we concentrate on the whole picture. We just happen to specialize, if you will, in the fathers. But we see a lot of fathers and children that don't necessarily have a diagnosis, some because they've never been in care, and others because they've yet to be diagnosed. And so our overall goal is to enhance the quality of life. Before I talk about being a family member, I want to tell a brief story. When I had my first set of children some years ago, I'm a father of 4 and a grandfather of 8, I'm happy to say. I took my daughter to the doctor, the pediatrician at the time, and she was 6 months old. I had her older brother Christopher with me, and he was 2 years old. And as I proceeded to the desk to check in, the nurse or the administrator at the desk said to me, "Oh, is Mom working today?" And although that was probably 24 and a half years ago, that stuck with me because as their father, I felt like it was just as much as my responsibility to be a part of the health and mental health and welfare of my kids as the mother. I responded by saying, we both work, I just happen to be more flexible, and so I'm able to bring my children, plus I want to be part of what their overall care is. That's what started me down this path years ago, and realizing the value of having fathers involved and how our system sometimes has alienated us based on their views of primary roles. Our goal here is to negotiate with Human Services on a personal level. All of the men that work with me have either been involved with, and in some cases, may have just got concluded being involved with some human service agency or things like child support. We're able to bring direct, what I call life experiences to the table, as well as helping our fathers to negotiate what can be a very cumbersome and a very difficult system. So our primary focus is to engage fathers and provide support and as well as activities. The importance of father, I think this picture says it all. One of the things that research says is that fathers are more likely to not only do homework and things, but to do more at-risk behaviors, such as throwing kids up in the air, playing with our kids, and even putting the child up on our shoulders to dunk a basketball. It was my father who first told me, or taught me, should I say, to ride a bike. And also it was my father who taught me how also to work and do some of those things. Unfortunately, one of the things that we see nowadays is that there's a overwhelming number of fatherless homes. So one of our primary focuses is to get fathers at the table so that these 3 roles that I think are critical to fatherhood and overall health of families can be increased. My first role as a father was to be a hero to my children. And I can honestly say now that my father is dead, that he was my first hero. My dad was a very soft-spoken man. He wasn't a man of many words, but he was a man of great principle. I recently had a conversation with my daughter, who is now 25, and we were rehashing her childhood. And we was having some real sensitive conversation around relationships, one that a lot of fathers have a hard time hearing, in particular when their children are grown. And so she was sharing with me that one of the things she did learn by being raised by myself and my wife is to learn what love is and what unconditional love is. And as she seeks a husband, or should I say a husband seeks her, she can relate to the relationship we had, which I think is very important. And again, that's one of the things we try to do is help our fathers to understand, in spite of their dilemmas, in spite of their setbacks, and even in spite of their barriers, they can still be heroes and they can be first loves to their daughters. One of the things that we use as an essential tool is bonding or relationships. I used to be involved with something called Communities That Care back in the mid-'90s to head off gang violence here in Allegheny County. And some of the research that was done by Catalino and Hawkins back then through Penn State talked about the essential to bonding to resiliency. I still believe that today. So we spend a whole lot of time first trying to create a bond with our fathers so that they can learn to trust us, and then help them to better understand the essentials to developing a relationship with their kids based on bonding. I use pictures a lot because men tend to be very visual, and I am. On the left side, there's a man dancing with his daughter. One of the things that we do, and I'm a part of a larger collaboration called Fathers Collaborators of Western Pennsylvania, which concentrates independently on our contracts, what we do, but collectively work with fathers all across the Allegheny County. And we do an annual father-daughter dance. And I must say that one of the highlights of my year is the father-daughter dance. I'm now primary functioning as a grandfather, in particular, taking them to the father-daughter dance. And this year, I had an opportunity to take one of my granddaughters who I just met a year ago. So the bonding goes on. Also, we believe that it's important for the fathers to understand that bonding is not based on just being able to provide, but to be present and available for our children. Engagement as recruiting is the primary thing that we do, and so I'll move through the next slide to kind of talk about how we do that. I stress with the fathers that I work with that engaging is a critical part of the work that we do here at Allegheny Family Network, and our recruiting is done several ways. One of the ways we do it is by presentations. Another way we do it is by word of mouth. And another way we recruit is by posting our stories and our successes to let other fathers be aware of what we're doing. Our engagement process starts off by looking for a few men that want to step up to the plate and have their relationship strengthened with their children. Network and collaborating. I believe the key to what we do is providing network and collaboration. Our organization is probably in relationship with, I cannot count them, but let me just safely say that my department has a relationship with about 25 or 30 people that we're actually in relationship with and we network with. These are not just organizations that provide services to fathers. These might be food banks. These could be a legal service to Duquesne University. This could be something used to help men get furniture. Some of the stuff that we do is to provide fathers with a network toolkit that we give them that has all the information of organizations that might meet their needs ongoing. Our degree of success has been based primarily on our networking with program school, churches. We also do work with an organization called Vietnam Vets. And we actually have a father now that sits in the courtroom 3 times a week in several judges' courtrooms to actually recruit men as they come into court and as they leave. One of the things that I noticed is a lot of men come to court ill-prepared. Some of them don't even know why they're there. They might have got subpoenaed. 80% of our cases come from Children, Youth, and Families, the Department of Human Services of Allegheny County. And so some of the men are coming into the situation blindly. And so one of the things we're helping them to do is on-the-spot navigation. I use that word because we don't tell our men what to do. What we say is, listen, let us get in the car with you and see where this road will take us. And we don't tell them what to do. We support them in what they want to do by providing them with information that can help them to better network for opportunities and other entities that will provide them. I talked about the father-daughter dance. Well over 3,000 men last year showed up at schools for Bring a Father School Day. Most recently, we had an event where we went to the Stellar Camp, had 2 busloads of fathers and their children, 80 all total. And in the month of August, we just sponsored as an agency a cookout that we do annually that we're pleased to say that we served well over 500 families, all that are actually in our database. So we're real pleased about the work that we're doing. A lot of the fathers that have been working with me for several years are coined ambassadors, so they now volunteer at these organizations, as well as I have them providing things like informal security and mentoring as we use them to give back. How do we keep our dads involved? I get asked this question all the time. One of the things is we first got connected to the National Father Initiative, and we, meaning my group, we are actually trained in 24/7 dads. We are actually trained in Inside Out, which we also go into Allegheny County Jail. I actually do it myself. It's one of my largest groups. And these are all fathers that are incarcerated. And let me just pause here and say this is one of the most difficult things I do. The majority of these men are minority, and the majority of these men are in their 20s. Yesterday, one of the men said to me, he had went to court, and I asked him what happened, and he said that he had 16 years sentence. And what really stunned me was he was happy. And I asked him, why did he seem to be smiling about 16 years of possible, or what I should say, incarceration? And he said to me that at least I have an out date. Now, fortunately, I've never been in jail. Trying to adjust to that culture and understand the needs of those fathers behind bars and the kids that are left fatherless is more than a notion. I'm happy to say that one of the ways we bridge that gap is we reach out to the mothers of the children and offer them support through another department of ours called ACCP, which is sort of like the department where you don't have to have any criteria to be involved with, and we provide services through that department for a lot of the mothers of these incarcerated men. We also been trained on nurturing parents. We're kicking that off next week. And we also provide activities like tailgate party, as I mentioned. We're going to the Pitt game on the 16th. A lot of the kids that we serve have never been to events. Took kids up to the Stellar Camp, which is an hour away from Pittsburgh. There were children on there that had never been outside of their neighborhood. One kid said that it's the furthest he ever had traveled. So I believe that the other thing we do is provide exposure. We do male and family enrichment by our annual mental health expo. And we also have our annual cookout, and we utilize tickets for kids to do things like amusement park, museums, and even culture events like the opera and the ballet, which I'm still trying to get my fathers used to. Here's what I refer to as our stages of engagement. Our first thing we do is when we get a referral is within 24 hours of that hard copy referral, our men are told that they are to give the father on that page a call and try to reach out to them within 24 weeks. I'm sorry, 24 hours. In a lot of cases, that's difficult because a lot of referrals we get don't even have good phone numbers and or addresses, but we do the best we can. After we reach that father, we do some preliminary paperwork based on his needs. The first sheet is called a family plan. based on his needs. And if he's coming from an organization such as the Department of Human Services, Child Welfare, they already have some predetermined goals, so we actually use them as springboards. Then we ask them what do they personally want to work on, and then we develop that into a plan. That takes roughly the first 30 days. That varies depending on the father's commitment and or our ability to find them. The second piece is actual planning, and that's looking at who's going to do what. And we call this our doing with stage, meaning this is more of working closer with the man on helping them to decide how they're going to do things like get to court, how they're going to make adjustments to find a job, how are they going to find housing, a major barrier, and look at things like their legal issues that might be preventing them from being able to move forward. Once we get that in writing, and that is actually in the database, our progress notes, which is a part of implementation, are directly connected to those goals. And I'm able to monitor that through our system on a weekly basis by supervisions with what we call our father support partners to see that they're not just meeting with the men, but they're doing something concrete by following these goals. Now, the implementation stage really varies. We have men that are extremely low functioning. We have men that are addicted to chemicals, and we have men that have some major mental health and other social issues. So that could vary anywhere from 30 to 90 days. We actually don't have a closeout date. That's really determined by the father, the system, and their willingness to provide cooperation in working with us. Our ultimate goal is to transition them, hopefully, as a participant in their children's lives. In some cases, we're looking at reunification. In some cases, the fathers are actually coming to us and they are in the stage of losing their parental rights. That's really sad because sometimes it's a little too late. So we're preparing them emotionally, perhaps not to be involved with their children ongoing. That's something I don't particularly like to do, but it is a part of our work. And then 30 days, 60 days, 90, and then a year after that, we have a survey that is done by one of our administrators over the phone with the fathers that have closed out in that year period to see how they're doing based on the work we've done with them. In the transition stage, our primary goal is to get them connected to what we call natural resources that already exist in their community or environment that they may not be using. We use things like churches, synagogues, food banks, other non-voluntary, other non-profit organizations, and so on and so forth. As I said, this is just a breakdown of the first 30 days. One of the things I just want to highlight here is I believe in the personal touch. One of the trends that we see in today's society is a use of the phone and text messaging. And I must say that I see more in our notes that our fathers are using that to as a conduit to meet with the men. I frown on that because I believe that a personal touch is the best touch. And so after they have made initial contact, I want them to build relationships face to face. That's what we say we do, and that's what we should be doing. And then I want to provide a caring attitude, non-judgmental. I use the backdrop of the sanctuary model, which says, not what's wrong with you, sir, but what has happened, and how can we help you move forward. And then we use something called a joint planning team approach, which we actually meet with all service providers in a team and conferencing meeting process to look at all the key players. And then we all know where will we be without paperwork. And so we obviously have to do that as well. Then we move into the coaching stage. These are the primary functions of the father support partner. We don't counsel, we actually provide support. So we use the word coach. If they need counseling, then we refer them to places that actually are credentialed to do so. And we have relationships with UPMC and Mercy Behavioral Health. Here in Allegheny County, we are rich in resources. We have some of the best mental health and drug and alcohol services there is. So we're able to network and get them provided in those areas with not a whole lot of trouble. And we do that by actually, in some cases, taking them or providing transportation. We see ourselves as guide, we provide support, and then we become the greatest cheerleader. A lot of men have never been affirmed and has a good friend. So one of the things that we do, we keep it professional, but we also try to get into intimate relationships. It's very important that we have concrete goals. So as an organization, as I stated, we do that and we work on them. Concrete goals are things that the fathers need to address. There's 3 areas that I want to mention here that are constantly a struggle for us. That is legal support. Most of the fathers we see fall in or under the poverty status. A lot of them do not work, and some of them, or a great deal of them, are on SSI and other forms of disability. So if they have, and some of them do, have criminal cases, they go in there and they just hope that they can obtain a public defender. That may or may not work for them. And so that's one issue. The other issue is housing. And I think this is a nationwide issue. But here in Allegheny County, there are very few resources for men that might need housing. There are a lot of avenues for ladies, but as far as men are concerned, now there are shelters for men, mainly that have drug and alcohol or homeless. But again, if they have their children with them, and because of the opiate addiction, we're seeing more fathers that are getting their kids. They're having a difficult time finding a place to live. Quick note, I have several fathers that are working with me that are living in the high-rises with their mothers, which is a violation of their mother's lease, which is the grandmother, because they have nowhere else to go. So that's a major concern of mine. And then employment. We do have a contract with another organization, and we do have on-site job coaching. And so his primary function is to help not just find a job, but help them to look at a career. We do career assessment. We actually do resume writing with and for them. And then we connect them with areas of interest versus just saying, go get a job. Then we provide as much action, meaning doing with them. And again, I can't emphasize enough, we provide support. Then our goal here is, depending on the plan, is you can see the gentleman, we don't necessarily see them moving apartments that nice. However, that's our goal. And so we do try to get them connected to natural settings, and we document our outcomes. One of the things I want to say is we're about to embark on something called It's Time to Tell Our Story in Real Time. We're one of the fathers that used to work with me prior to my promotion actually has a marketing company now, and he's going to be going around with our fathers in-home and having them to tell their story. And we're going to put this on things like public media, like both in-house and on things like Facebook, to show a different side of fathers. And a lot of what they're going to do is tell their story in real time, and we're going to publish that. I'm excited about that. We do the follow-up work, like I stated, to see if we're making a difference. We have 5 different groups that we run throughout Allegheny County. All of our groups are catered. They're catered by one of the fathers that graduated from Bidwell, which is a free school. If you participate in a year, you can actually come out of there with a degree, or should I say with a certification. So one of our fathers is now going to be our caterer. We'll pay him a stipend to do that. We also provide various workshops throughout Allegheny County for the men in areas like employment, like respite, like legal guardianship, school-based issues, and things like working with your children and different parental styles. And this is the toolkit I talked about. We actually give them a binder that has resources in there through this toolkit, and it's upgraded every year because things change, as you know, and rotate in social services. But along with our peer support, it has employment information, more information about where they can get more support after we might close out. It has information about their legal concern. It has in there people like the Urban League and others that actually do provide education and housing. and then other places where they can continue to get ongoing support. And we're always here. Even if a gentleman has closed out, I have men come back all the time. This is one of the breakfasts that we held at Golden Corral ourselves. And as you can see, the group is very diverse. This is just one of many groups that we do on an ongoing basis. And these are the names of some of the other groups we do, not only for our fathers, but for our other constituents as well. And ultimately, our goal is to provide and see something like this. This is how you connect the link, by providing opportunities for fathers to reconnect with their children and help to be a part of what we hope to be a healthy development through our resources and or process. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, George. That was a pretty amazing description of the work that you guys are doing. It's, I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
So let's, if there are any questions, we can start seeing those through the chat. That's how we're going to ask some questions. And while we're waiting for a few of those, I do have one for you, George.
Yes, sir.
On average, when your staff is working with individual fathers, how many different fathers are they working with? So
Great question. The average is 15 to 25 cases. I just recently hired 2 more father support partners that will start on the 11th. My goal is to get the cases more around 10 so that we can have a greater impact. We've gone as high as 28 and anywhere between 0 and 28. The average is around 20, sir.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot.
We have 110 registered right now, and I haven't checked the database for today. In fact, we have the highest referrals out of all the departments.
Wow. That's remarkable. So we have a question on the public chat. It says, what is the average length of services?
Well, that depends, as I stated earlier, on the father. Fortunately, we don't have a time frame. The average is somewhere between 6 months to a year. I have several fathers that have been with us for 2 years because they are in the terminating rights process, and that takes 2 years. And so we have been with them since the case opened to try to prevent that from happening by helping them to address the goals that CWS has put in place. We've had other people that come in and they're further along in terms of their own development and capacity, and so they might be open around 6 months.
Okay.
They determine that. That's what we mean by support and by voice and choice. We don't come in telling them anything. We really do not do that.
All right. And someone has asked, George, what's your specific title?
I am called a program supervisor for Allegheny Family Network Fathers Involved Now program.
Okay. And, at the introduction, George, I mentioned that your funding comes from the Allegheny County Department of Human Services, and it's, you said, backed by a grant from the Heinz Foundation. Is that where all of your funding for this program comes from?
Yes. Now, certainly we have other smaller donations that give us the opportunity to do a lot of the things that we do. We do a lot of things I didn't talk about because of time, but those are the major ones. We just got an increase from the Department of Human Services. This department, when I came, there was 2 of us. So I'm pleased to say we've grown by 400%. I don't even have space right now for our fathers, which is a good thing. And what I want to mention about our grant, Heinz had first given us a grant 3 years ago for $400,000, something they do not do. They gave us another $300,000 over the next 3 years because they were pleased with our outcomes. I'm extremely proud of that.
Wow, that's phenomenal. All right. Well, thanks again, George. We really appreciate all the work you're doing and sharing that with us today.
Yes, sir.
Next, we're going to go across the country to Tacoma, Washington to hear from Nelson Rascone. Nelson is the Executive Director of Dad's Move. They provide training, advocacy, resources, and support to fathers and their families who are raising children with behavioral health disorders. Nelson has 3 children, all of whom have disabilities, and he got into this work because it was such a struggle getting help for his own kids, and he wanted to help others have a less bumpy road. Nelson is a certified peer counselor and has a master's in public administration. Nelson, please take it away.
Thank you, Hugh. Yeah, so as you guys look at our mission statement, we're kind of very different from the last presenter in that our focus is entirely put on families that have children that have behavioral health and mental health and to a certain degree substance abuse disorders. We're also a little different in the fact that while we are male focused, we have worked with a lot of mothers as well, kind of providing that male perspective that is often missing in the families that we deal with. There is, sorry, switching slides here. So all of us within the group have either had children or raising grandchildren or both that have some sort of mental health disorder. Currently, we are all male within the organization, and we have found that that a lot of the families, when the fathers get encouragement and training from other fathers that live this, there's vastly better outcomes. You have more increased involvement with IEP meetings, counseling appointments, and such things like that. As probably most of us are aware, most family-run organizations throughout the country are predominantly run by moms. While there's nothing wrong with that, it leaves out that perspective from fathers. And unlike a lot of the groups that are out there that are kind of focused on father engagement, we have actually dealt with mostly fathers that are living in the home, they are married, but they're not truly engaged. They're not the ones that are primarily taking care of the problems. We often find that because of the sensitive nature we are dealing with mental health, which comes with its own stigma, many men truly have a hard time accepting those disabilities within their children. So we do a lot of work of advocacy and awareness and letting guys know that it's okay that their children have these issues, and we teach them how to deal with it. And in that, we teach them how to better get along with their spouses, because we believe entirely, and I think the data shows it, that you have much, much better outcomes when everyone's on the same page, which is a large thing that we have seen, and most of us within the group have personally dealt with. I certainly have. Where you get a huge divide between mom and dad when you're raising these difficult children that are exhibiting behaviors that many of us are not used to dealing with. And again, there's still a huge stigma around mental health in the United States and worldwide. So this is a lot of what we do is awareness around that. So our organization has been around since 2011. We are all volunteers at this point. All of us came into this work, like I was saying earlier, because we have kids or grandkids that have mental health or behavioral health disorders. When we were founded, it was kind of when the economy had collapsed, and we had seen the demise of many organizations in the state, and those of us that formed the organization saw a huge void and need for educating fathers that were raising children with these challenges. Which gets to the heart of our program. Most of what we do is trainings. We are a big believer in trainings and giving of information and teaching fathers and their families on how to navigate the system. While we don't have a perfect system within our state or many other states throughout the United States, a key to it is learning how to access our systems and how to get the supports that you need. And by doing that, you not only educate the father, you educate the whole family, and the outcomes are a lot better. So one thing that's often asked about us is about diversity. This is one of the things we also focus on. Even though we are an organization primarily based within the Seattle-Tacoma metropolitan area, a lot of the work we've been doing over the last couple of years in efforts to diversify and reach even more rural and underserved communities is putting our efforts into inner city neighborhoods, rural communities, tribal communities, where the statistics clearly show there's even a greater need for father involvement in those areas and for awareness or greater awareness around mental health issues. We have also been focusing efforts on reaching out to the gay community because there's been a large increase of adopted children into those families. And again, you have, with the stigma and those particular issues, they need even greater support than probably most families. Over the last 6 years, in the effort of trying to give information, we have really focused on trying to educate ourselves. We have become certified in numerous trainings. There's 3 of us within the organization who have gone through the Washington State peer certification training and have also become support group facilitators. We have 2 people trained in mental health first aid, 1 person that does youth and 1 person that does the adult. So it's really, we really get back to that component that we believe that giving the education and support is absolutely key to successful outcomes. We also strive not just to help fathers cope with their own children. We're a big believer in trying to get more men into the system. All of us within the organization in some capacity have worked within the mental health community and continue to do so today. We also believe that a huge component is trying to get more men working in the system, working with other families. Currently, we have, I believe, what are we up to? We keep adding numerous trainings every month, but currently we focus on 12 core trainings that teach increased parenting skills and systems navigation that show fathers on a better way of dealing with their children, and like I was saying earlier, having improved relations with their spouses and other family members. So now I'm going to go into just kind of give a quick snapshot of what our core trainings are. IEP 504, which many organizations do, but again, ours kind of really tries focusing on getting the father to attend these IEP meetings, which unfortunately all too often is not the case. We're huge into that. Several of us within the organization have been advocates for other families at hundreds of IEP meetings, so that's one of our big trainings. We also do a training that kind of does an overview of different parenting skills trainings out there, like 1, 2, 3 Magic and Collaborative Problem Solving and Love and Logic. We have a huge de-escalation training that we have done all over the state of Washington, and this de-escalation training is focused on how to do hands-off procedures, on how to de-escalate a child that is nearing meltdown or already there. Also, another kind of focus of ours that gets back to getting men actually involved in the system is also teaching parents on how to advocate within the legislative system to try and improve our mental health system, because certainly in Washington, as I'm sure it is in many other states, it is an imperfect system, but those systems only change by getting people down to talk to the people that make the laws and give them the stories of how we have dealt with our children and what it's like raising those children. So in a nutshell, that is largely what we do is educate and advocate for fathers to get involved in the system. In doing this, we partner with dozens of other nonprofits across the state. We could not do what we do without their support. We have a strong partnership with other men's groups in the state that may have a slightly different focus, but at the end of the day, we are trying to empower fathers to be part of their families more. And how we reach those fathers, we do through 2 big ways. One is we hold 2 parent retreats a year, which recently we've been splitting between a co-ed one in the spring and a fall retreat, which is for fathers only. We do a lot of recruitment and engagement of fathers at that. We also try to connect fathers at those weekend trainings with other fathers that are near them, so they can get a built-in support structure, which gets back to the overall wraparound principle that our organization lives and breathes by. We also maintain 2 support groups where fathers can go and again connect with other dads that are living and raising kids just like theirs. And we do numerous events with our partners around the state for trainings, for resource fairs, and other events where the goal is just to train parents on how to navigate the system and where to go. And we probably take hundreds of calls a year where fathers call us trying to figure out what to do with their kids when they're blowing out. We've all been there, and we try our best to lead parents to the right place and what resource will help them.
Is that it, Nelson?
That, yes, in a nutshell.
All right.
Are there any questions I can answer?
So I've got a couple first while we're waiting for some
Okay.
questions to come up in the chat box. You mentioned that you're an all-volunteer organization. How do you ensure the quality of services that you're providing, quality of training, with a volunteer group?
We do this, I kind of touched on this earlier. This is why we try to go and get officially certified in training, so we are actually trained properly on how to give the information. As an example, we have 2 members that will be going next week to get officially certified in the mental health first aid. Several of us have gone and officially gotten trained on how to promote and provide collaborative problem-solving principles, and those trainings were, again, actually taught by the creators of that training. So to answer your question, we try to get certified where we can and go to the sources of the information as best as possible. And we pay for this through grants and other private donations that we get.
Okay. You mentioned in the parent skill training that you do the 3 different sources that you mentioned.
Okay.
I think it was 1, 2, 3 magic, collaborative problem solving, I guess now called collaborative and proactive solutions.
Yeah.
And love and logic. Those 3 different approaches are not entirely consistent with one another. So
no, they're not.
How do you manage to teach about all of those in that training?
Well, here it goes to the principle of what we believe. Quite frankly, particularly with the kids that many of us are dealing with that have behavioral and mental health disorders, it's all about tools. We are trying to give fathers different tools that they can use. So oftentimes a successful approach will usually mean taking one aspect from each of those trainings to deal with a particular situation. And also we have found through our own lived experience that our kids change rapidly, and we need to be armed on how to have different approaches to deal with our child as they evolve and grow up.
All right, that sounds great. Just curious about your retreats that you hold, and I didn't quite catch if you mentioned what's your capacity for those retreats? How many do you get, and how many could you possibly have at those retreats?
So typically we actually try to keep the numbers around no more than 30. We certainly could have capacity for more than that, but we have found through 6, almost 7 years of doing this work that that's about a good number to where you can get good engagement from the fathers without people being left out and things becoming overwhelmed.
Okay. That's very helpful. Sounds like you're doing great work there, Nelson, and I'm sure that you'll be getting questions after the fact when people get your contact information, which I believe is on one of the next slides. And I'm not seeing any particular questions right at this point. But I have to say that I'll be contacting both you and George and trying to figure out how we can apply some of the things you guys have learned in our own state, because we have not done, I'm feeling kind of sheepish here, we have not done well in reaching out to fathers. So thanks for all the work that you do, and I guess I'm going to turn this back over to Jane.
Thanks, Hugh. And I think there was a slide about strategies. And these are some strategies that an organization, Strengthening Families, has put out there for ways to engage more men. And one is employing men as staff members in various positions, creating an environment welcoming and inclusive of all family members, which I think most family-run organizations do routinely, but consistently communicating with both fathers and mothers on all issues concerning their children and making this a policy. And I think, you know, when I was the director of a state organization in Maryland, I think I would have to raise my hand and say, we didn't really make that a policy to be connecting with both parents. And we have just heard a wonderful array of possible activities and programs to bring more men in, everything from father-daughter dance to retreats. Very exciting. And then intentionally inviting and encouraging men to become active participants. I'm wondering if anybody on the call has other strategies that they use. If you could share them in the chat box, we would very much like to hear that. And any of the presenters, if you want to add anything to that, please feel free to do so.
Yes, this is George Jane. I'd like to make a comment. This has been extremely exciting, and it encourages me to press on. One of the things I want to say is that next Monday we'll be actually hiring one of the fathers that was on our caseload to actually be a full-time employee. And this includes benefits and the whole 9 yards. And this gentleman had a difficult time getting jobs because of his background. He's a father of 4. He's a single father. Mother died in childbirth. And he even adopted her children, and as well as he was raising his daughter named Miracle. So employing the men as staff is really, if that can happen, that is really a major deal. So I'm excited about that for him.
Boy, if that's not the best outcome you could imagine, kudos to your program and to that father. That's wonderful. Other ideas from anyone?
Yeah, just one more, because your strategies are great. One of the things that NFI has is a evaluation that can be downloaded looking at whether or not your environment is father-friendly. And this includes on how they are welcomed, to the language that is being used. But one of the things we've done is on purpose put up other images other than the ones that normally are put up in organizations that directly speak to fathers. And that has been very helpful, making this a father-friendly, saying we want you to be a part of this, we encourage you to be a part of this, and you're welcome here. So things like those two things are very, very, very critical. A lot of environments I go into are not father-friendly. They just aren't, because nobody's really taking the time to assess whether or not it's important. That's crucial right there.
This is Nelson. I would have to second that. That is a huge thing that I've talked about in many years, and I don't think it's through the intent. Unfortunately, because of the lack of involvement from many fathers over the years, these environments that serve our families have been catering to moms for so long, we forget about these things. And we've worked with fathers that are single fathers. I'm one of them, where we can speak to that when we go in even a WIC office or DSHS or many of these environments, it doesn't feel comfortable to men. So I think that's I cannot emphasize that one more.
So what would you recommend to make it a father-friendly environment? I'm throwing something out like sports magazines or something.
I'm sure Nelson can suggest. Well, one of the things is, obviously, and this is clear that Nelson has the same passion that I do, is we have to speak up. A lot of times we don't say anything and let people know that, do you realize that there's nothing here that suggests I'm welcome? That's one. Education, he mentioned it earlier, education to the importance of making fathers feel inclusive is very important. Number two is actually buying material. I mean, and whether it's posters or a sign or I actually have pictures of the fathers that we serve around the organization. We're about ready to do something called the Fatherhood Hall of Fame. Our organization has given us a whole wall to actually put a mirror on and put up fathers that we're going to bring into our Hall of Fame based on them being nominated by their peers. And they get a pirate jersey and a real pirate jersey and a real pirate hat, and a professional picture goes up on the wall. Now, that's the extent to where we're going to, but just starting by even asking the questions and utilizing the survey, which gives more suggestions, is a place to start.
Great idea.
I would also agree with that. I think a lot of it is not just pictures, but in the environments, the office where men go, simple things like putting out reading material that would be more of an interest to men. I can raise as an example, when my son was young, I admittedly took advantage of WIC, which I had every right to. That is definitely one area where that could have an environment that's a little bit more inviting to both parents, your counseling offices, your doctor's offices, just simple things. What you put on the wall and what you put out as reading material or activities that appeal to both moms and dads.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Well, we've heard a lot of great strategies here, and we've had a couple of things about contact. So here is how you can contact these stars that we've just had on the call here. Hugh Davis from Wisconsin, George Fleming from Allegheny Family Network, Fathers Involved Now, and Nelson Raskin from Dad's Move. Now this PowerPoint, you will be able to, you see under the chat box, there's another little box called Files, and there's two documents in there. One is a copy of this PowerPoint, so you can download this PowerPoint and you will have that contact information as part of it. The second thing on here, and a file to be downloaded, is a newsletter. FREDLA does a newsletter called Great Ideas for Family Leaders. Great Ideas for short. And we did a special edition on this topic of supporting fathers. So the second file there in the that box titled Files is FREDLA's Great Ideas Special Edition newsletter on supporting fathers. And in that are additional resources about both Georgia's program and Nelson's program and the National Fatherhood Initiative and several other resources. So you can download that. You can send that email out to your families as well, out to other partner organizations, because it's got good information about and resources on supporting fathers. So I also want to do a shameless commercial for FREDLA's annual meeting that is coming up in Washington. Everybody on this call is cordially invited. You don't have to be working for a family organization or a member of FREDLA even. This one-day meeting is open to all family leaders. If you are working in a government, local, or state organization, if you're a program director, if you are a board member of a family-run organization, this meeting is for you. It's very, very different from a large conference. This is a small meeting. We have an incredible lineup of presenters, starting with Congressman Joe Kennedy from Massachusetts, who is a big advocate for children's mental health. We have Paolo Del Vecchio, who is the director of the Center for Mental Health Services at SAMHSA. We have a star-studded panel of family leaders themselves. Hugh Davis, to drop a name, is one of those panelists for us. And we're having a TED-style talk by Darren L. Harris, who's the executive director of the Louisiana Family Organization. So you really will be given lots of ideas and opportunities for networking and resources. This is where you can click to register. I will say hotel rooms are filling up, and the deadline to get the hotel rate is this Friday. So please move quickly. We would love to meet and greet each of you. Here's our special ideas newsletter that I mentioned, but you can also download it right there. We have a learning community closed Facebook page. There is the link if you want to join the Facebook page. We are in the process of finalizing our topics and our dates for our learning community for the year. So we will shortly be putting out a calendar of dates. I can tell you that our next one, let me see if it's on here. No, sorry, it's not. Our next learning community, excuse me, is going to be in November, and I'm trying to find the date. Melissa, if you know the date, because of Thanksgiving, I know we had to move it, so I'm not sure I have the date, but it is on the topic of supporting grandparents, which is another aspect of supporting families that we are seeing growing and growing. So that is going to be our next topic in November. So with that, I want to thank our presenters, Nelson, Hugh, George. I want to thank our incredible tech team at the University of Maryland that hosts these calls. Gary and Tiara, thank you so much for today. Thanks to all of you. Thank you, Peggy. Our next learning community is November 30th. She was able to locate it on supporting grandparents. So mark it on your calendars right now. We hope to see you at our annual meeting. If not, please have a good September and October, and hopefully we will meet again in November. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.